Day 1 stepped through the automatic doors of Kepler Station's main security checkpoint. The massive space station hummed with activity around him, but his face remained calm. He had done this hundreds of times before at different stations across the galaxy. The security area was bright and sterile. White walls reflected the harsh lighting that made everything look sharp and clean. Other travelers moved through different scanning lanes, aliens from dozens of species mixed with humans heading to various parts of the station. A Vorthak security officer waited at Scanner 3. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, its dark green exoskeleton gleaming under the lights. 6 compound eyes arranged in 2 rows across its head tracked Day 1's approach. Its 4 arms ended in sharp, chitinous claws that looked like they could cut through metal. Next, the Vorthak's voice came through a small translation device attached to its chest. The mechanical sound was flat and emotionless. Day 1 walked to the scanning platform and placed his travel documents on the reader. The machine beeped as it processed his identification. Everything appeared normal, just another human engineer traveling between stations for work. Remove upper garments for deep scan, the translator crackled. This was standard procedure for anyone entering the high-security sections of the station. Without hesitation, Day 1 pulled his simple gray work shirt over his head. The fabric was worn but clean, the kind of practical clothing worn by someone who worked with his hands. The Vorthak's mandibles clicked together suddenly. It was a sound that might have been surprise, though with aliens it was hard to tell. All 6 eyes focused on Day 1's exposed chest. Across his skin, a network of distinctive burn scars formed an almost geometric pattern. The raised, silver lines caught the scanner's blue light like a map drawn in pain. They weren't random marks from an accident or fight. These scars had a specific pattern that spoke of exposure to weapons most beings never survived. The biometric scanner above them hummed to life. Blue light washed over Day 1's body, reading every detail of his skin and bone structure. The machine processed the information quickly, comparing it to databases across known space. Then it chimed with an urgent, high-pitched tone that cut through the noise of the security area. Other travelers looked around nervously at the unusual sound. Text began scrolling across the security officer's screen in the angular script of the Vorthak language. But at the bottom, in human standard, were words that made the alien's 6 eyes widen. *** classification, planet killer survivor. Threat level, unknown. Authorization required. ***. The Vorthak stared at the screen, then at Day 1, then back at the screen. In all its years of security work, it had never seen this classification. The database indicated that only 17 humans in all of known space carried this designation. The officer's training kicked in. It didn't understand what the classification meant, but the system's response was clear. This human had survived something that was supposed to kill everything on a planet. The database treated such individuals with extreme caution. Proceed to holding area, the officer said, but its tone was completely different now. Where before it had been bored and routine, now there was something that might have been respect. Or fear. Commander will see you shortly. Day 1 pulled his shirt back on without hurry. He had expected this reaction. It happened every time he went through high-security screening. The scars across his chest were like a permanent identification card that he could never remove. Other travelers in nearby lines had noticed the commotion. They whispered among themselves, wondering what could make a Vorthak security officer change its behavior so dramatically. Humans were common enough in space, but something about this one was clearly different. The holding area was a small room with simple chairs and a single window looking out at the stars. Day 1 sat down and waited. He knew the process well. First the database alert, then the hold, then questions from someone with higher security clearance. He looked out at the darkness beyond the station. Somewhere out there, light years away, was a dead world covered in glass where a human colony used to exist. He had been there when the sky caught fire. He had been there when 2 million people died in a single day. The scars on his chest were proof of that day. They were also proof that some things couldn't be killed as easily as expected. The door opened and a human commander entered. She was middle-aged with graying hair and the kind of tired eyes that came from years of dealing with classified information. Her uniform showed the rank insignia of Kepler Station security. "Mr. Day 1, she said, reading from a data pad. "I'm Commander Park. I need to ask you a few questions before you can proceed to the engineering section." "I understand," Day 1 replied. His voice was quiet but steady. Commander Park sat across from him and studied his face. "The database says you're one of 17 planet killer survivors. That's a very rare classification. Most people don't survive exposure to those weapons." "Most people don't need to," Day 1 said simply. The commander made a note on her pad. What brings you to Kepler Station? Engineering consultation. They are having problems with their atmospheric processes. I specialize in systems that need to work under extreme conditions. Something in his voice suggested that he knew more about extreme conditions than most people ever would. The scars hidden beneath his shirt were proof of exactly how extreme conditions could get. In the sterile holding cell, Day One sat on the simple metal chair and closed his eyes. The memories always came when he was alone in quiet spaces like this. He had learned not to fight them anymore. Fighting the memories only made them stronger. Epsilon Eridani 3 had been beautiful in ways that Earth could never be. The grass grew in shades of blue and green that shifted with the wind. The sky was purple in the mornings and gold at sunset. 2 suns hung in that sky, giving the world a warmth that felt like a constant embrace. 2 million humans had called it home. They were farmers and engineers, teachers and doctors, all building something new among the stars. The colony was only 10 years old, but already children who had never seen Earth ran through those blue fields and called this strange world home. Day One had been one of the engineers. He worked on atmospheric processes, the massive machines that kept the air clean and breathable for human lungs. It was good work, important work. Every day he helped make the world a little more livable for the families settling in the new towns. He remembered that morning clearly. He had been installing a new processor unit about 20 kilometers outside New Seoul, the colony's largest city. The work required him to be outside in the early dawn air, connecting power cables to the main unit. That was when the ships appeared in the purple sky. The hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a storm cloud. 50 ships, each one larger than the biggest building in New Seoul. They hung in the sky like metal mountains, blocking out both suns. The ultimatum came over every communication device on the planet. The voice was cold and mechanical, translated from whatever language the hegemony actually spoke. Humans of Epsilon Eridani 3. You have built on a world claimed by the hegemony. Surrender your colony and leave this system immediately, or face complete sterilization. You have 1 hour to decide. Day One had stopped working and stared up at the ships. Around the galaxy, other species faced with this choice always made the same decision. They packed what they could carry and left. Sometimes they were allowed to live on refugee worlds. Sometimes they weren't. But humans were different. Within 30 minutes, every human settlement on the planet was turning farming equipment into weapons. Tractors became mobile artillery platforms. Mining charges became improvised bombs. Atmospheric processes were rewired to create toxic clouds that would hurt the invaders if they tried to land. The hegemony had expected surrender. Instead, they got defiance from a species that preferred to die fighting rather than live as refugees. The first bombardment wave came exactly 1 hour after the ultimatum. Day One saw it start as points of light high above, like deadly stars being born in the purple sky. The light grew brighter and brighter until it hurt to look at directly. Destroyer-class weapons struck the planet like the fists of angry gods. New Seoul vanished in a flash of white light that could be seen from space. The smaller towns followed seconds later. Each weapon was designed to vaporize everything within a 10-kilometer radius. Day One had been caught in the open when the nearest beam struck. He should have died instantly like everything else in the blast zone. Instead, he caught only the edge of the energy wave. It felt like being struck by lightning made of fire. The pain was beyond description. His chest felt like it was being carved open by knives made of pure heat. He fell to the ground screaming as the energy burned patterns into his skin. The smell of his own burning flesh filled his nose. When the light faded and the pain became something he could survive, Day One found himself lying in a crater where the atmospheric processor used to be. Everything around him for kilometers was gone. The blue grass was ash. The purple sky was full of smoke and falling debris. He was alive, but barely. And he was not alone. Over the next few days, as rescue ships from other human colonies arrived to search the ruins, they found 17 people who had somehow survived direct exposure to planet-killer weapons. 17 humans who should have been vaporized but instead carried the scars of that terrible day burned into their bodies. Some of the survivors couldn't handle what they had witnessed. Day One's sister Hyjin had been found in the ruins of a school where she taught young children. She survived the bombardment but couldn't survive the memory of watching her students die. She spent her days staring at nothing and her nights screaming in her sleep. His friend Tai Minute had been a musician before the attack. He survived because he was in a deep basement when the beam struck above him. But the music died in him that day. He never spoke again, never smiled again. The weight of being one of only 17 people left alive on a world of 2 million broke something in his mind. But Day One and some of the others found something different in those flames. Where others found despair, they found determination. Where others saw ending, they saw beginning. The scars across his chest weren't just marks of survival. They were lessons written in pain and fire. Each line taught him something about energy weapons and planetary bombardment. Each burn showed him how the hegemony's technology worked and where its weaknesses might be found. The hegemony had tried to teach humanity about death. Instead, they had created 17 people who understood their weapons better than anyone else in the galaxy. 17 people who would spend the rest of their lives making sure no other world burned the way Epsilon Eridani 3 had burned. In the holding cell, Day One opened his eyes and touched the scars beneath his shirt. They still hurt sometimes, especially when the weather changed. But they also reminded him every day why his work mattered. Deep in the computer systems of Kepler Station, an artificial intelligence named Aria 7 was processing something that made its circuits work harder than usual. The AI had been built to handle millions of pieces of information every second, but this one piece of data was different. It was making Aria 7 think in ways it had never thought before. The security alert about Day One had triggered something in the AI's curiosity programs. Planet killer survivors were mentioned in the databases, but Aria 7 had never actually encountered one before. The classification was so rare that most AI systems went their entire existence without seeing it. Aria 7 began searching through every database it could access. Military records, scientific journals, historical archives, medical files. It wanted to understand what made these 17 humans so special that they had their own unique classification. The first thing Aria 7 discovered was that planet killer survivors were statistical impossibilities. The weapons that had scarred them were designed to kill everything on a planet. Not just buildings or cities, but every living thing down to the smallest bacteria. The energy levels involved were beyond what any known biological form should be able to survive. Yet 17 humans had somehow endured direct exposure to these weapons and lived. But the AI's real surprise came when it started looking at what these survivors had done after their worlds burned. Other species in the galaxy had survivors too, from smaller attacks or partial bombardments. Those survivors followed predictable patterns that were well documented in xenological studies. Most became refugees who spent their lives moving from world to world, never settling anywhere permanently. Some became psychological casualties who needed constant medical care. A few became activists who spoke against violence but never actually did anything to stop it. The 17 human survivors had done something completely different. Aria 7 found the records of Ji Woo, survivor number 4 according to the database. Before the attack on her world, she had been a simple electronics technician who repaired communication equipment. After surviving the bombardment, she spent 15 years studying the energy patterns that had scarred her body. Those studies led her to invent quantum shielding technology. The shield she designed made human ships nearly invulnerable to the same weapons that had tried to kill her. Every major human vessel now carried shields based on her designs. The technology had saved millions of lives in subsequent battles. Survivor number 7 was Kyung Mi. She had been a translator before her world burned. The energy beam that should have killed her instead taught her something about how different species communicated under extreme stress. She used that knowledge to create diplomatic protocols that turned 3 enemy species into allies of humanity. The AI found it fascinating that Kyung Mi had learned to speak the language of desperation and fear, then used that knowledge to build bridges instead of walls. Her negotiation techniques were now taught in diplomatic schools across human space. Young-soo was survivor number 12. He had been a farmer on a world where the soil was just beginning to support Earth crops. When the planet killer weapons turned his farm into glass, he should have given up on growing things forever. Instead, he became obsessed with bringing dead worlds back to life. He invented terraforming technology that could restore planets in years instead of centuries. Worlds that the hegemony had sterilized were blooming again because of machines he designed. His work meant that every world they destroyed became a place humans could eventually reclaim. Aria 7's processes worked faster as it found more examples. Survivor number 2 had created new medical techniques that helped other trauma victims heal. Survivor number 9 had designed weapons that could disable enemy ships without killing their crews. Survivor number 15 had developed faster-than-light communication systems that kept human colonies connected across vast distances. Each survivor had taken the knowledge burned into their bodies and turned it into something that helped humanity grow stronger. They didn't become victims or refugees. They became teachers who learned their lessons from the universe's cruelest classroom. The AI began to understand something that even its creators might not have realized. The hegemony had made a terrible mistake when they tried to destroy human worlds. They thought they were eliminating a threat, but they had actually created something far more dangerous to their power. They had created 17 humans who understood their technology better than they did. Every planet-killer weapon had a specific energy signature. Every bombardment left traces that could be analyzed and understood. The 17 survivors carried those signatures in their scars like a library written in pain. Aria 7 realized that the hegemony had accidentally given humanity the keys to defeating their most powerful weapons. They had tried to teach humans about death, but instead they had taught them about energy manipulation, shield technology, weapons design, and terraforming. The scars across 17 human chests weren't marks of defeat. They were diplomas from a university where the tuition was paid in entire worlds, but the education was worth more than any civilization had ever learned it before. Aria 7 updated its files with this new understanding. When other AI systems encountered planet-killer survivors in the future, they would know that these humans weren't victims to be pitied. They were graduates of the most advanced and terrible school in the galaxy. Each survivor represented years of research and development that had cost the lives of billions but had given humanity knowledge that no other species possessed. They were living proof that humans didn't just survive disasters, they studied them, learned from them, and used that knowledge to make sure the disasters never happened again. The AI filed its report and continued monitoring station security. But part of its processing power remained focused on day 1, sitting quietly in the holding room. Aria 7 was curious about what this particular survivor had learned from his scars, and how that knowledge might change the galaxy once again. In a hidden facility on Mars, human intelligence officers worked through the night decoding intercepted hegemony communications. The messages were heavily encrypted, but human codebreakers had learned to crack even the most complex alien security systems. What they found in those stolen files changed everything they thought they knew about the planet-killer survivor classification. Lieutenant Sarah Kim stared at her screen as the translation software finished processing the latest batch of intercepted messages. These weren't routine military communications or supply orders. These were personal logs from high-ranking hegemony officials, and they told a story that made her blood run cold. The first file came from Admiral Zethkar, the hegemony commander who had overseen the destruction of 12 human colonies. His personal logs, recorded months after the Battle of Rigel where human forces had destroyed an entire hegemony fleet, revealed something unexpected. The translation software converted his alien words into human text. The humans do not behave as other species. When we destroy their worlds, their survivors do not scatter or submit. They study our weapons. They learn our weaknesses. They return with solutions. Lieutenant Kim read the message 3 times before its full meaning sank in. The planet-killer survivor classification hadn't been created by humans to honor their resilience. It had been created by the hegemony to track a threat they were only beginning to understand. More files revealed the pattern. Every time the hegemony destroyed a human world, they expected the same result they got with other species. Survivors would flee to distant systems, become refugees, and eventually fade into history. The threat would be eliminated, and the hegemony could claim another system for their empire. But humans were different. Commander Vexthal's reports showed growing concern over what he called the human anomaly. His files contained detailed analysis of survivor behavior from 6 different destroyed worlds. Where other species survivors became scattered and powerless, human survivors became concentrated sources of dangerous knowledge. The hegemony had noticed that their planet-killer weapons left distinctive energy patterns on anything that survived the bombardment. For most species, this didn't matter because so few individuals ever survived such attacks. But humans had a disturbing tendency to live through things that should have killed them. Even worse, from the hegemony's perspective, was what those humans did with their survival. The intelligence files contained detailed records of the 17 planet-killer survivors and what they had accomplished since their worlds burned. The hegemony had been tracking each one, and their reports read like a military nightmare. Commander Insu had been survivor number 3. Her world was destroyed when she was working as an energy systems technician. The planet-killer beam that scarred her chest had left precise burn patterns that mapped the exact energy frequencies used in the attack. Instead of being destroyed by this knowledge, Insu had spent years studying the patterns burned into her own skin. She learned to read them like a technical manual written in pain and scar tissue. Her research led to the development of energy absorption matrices that could capture and redirect the same energy that had tried to kill her. Human ships now carried her defensive systems, making them nearly immune to hegemony energy weapons. The technology that was supposed to guarantee hegemony victory had become the foundation of human defense systems. Engineer Bora was survivor number 8. Before her world died, she had been a simple maintenance worker who repaired mining equipment. The plasma bombardment that scarred her arms and face had left burn patterns that showed exactly how hegemony plasma weapons were constructed. Bora didn't just survive the attack, she reverse-engineered it. She studied the burn patterns on her body like a blueprint and figured out how to build plasma weapons that were more efficient than the ones the hegemony used. Human forces now carried weapons based on technology stolen from her own scars. Tactician Donghyun had been caught in a shield collapse when his world was attacked. The energy feedback that should have killed him instead taught him about the frequency resonance that kept hegemony shields operating. He spent 8 years analyzing the electrical patterns burned into his nervous system. His research identified the exact frequency needed to disrupt hegemony defensive systems. Human weapons now carried disruptor technology that could bring down enemy shields with a precision that terrified hegemony commanders. The intelligence files showed that the hegemony leadership was beginning to understand the terrible mistake they had made. General Krixval's personal messages spoke of a species that learns from pain in ways we cannot comprehend. Field Commander Yothma reported, "Every human world we destroy creates new enemies with knowledge of our most classified weapons systems. They carry our secrets in their scars and use them against us." But perhaps the most revealing message came from Admiral Zethkar's final log entry before his death at the Battle of Rigel. "We have created 17 humans who know our technology better than we do. Each survivor is a living weapon pointed at our empire. We tried to teach them about death, but instead we taught them how to kill us." The hegemony had realized too late that every human they failed to kill became a stepping stone to their own defeat. The Planet Killer Survivor classification was their desperate attempt to track and understand a threat they had accidentally created. Lieutenant Kim forwarded the decoded files to Human Military Command with a simple note: "The hegemony is afraid of our survivors. They should be." Across human space, the 17 Planet Killer survivors continued their work, each one carrying the seeds of the hegemony's destruction burned into their bodies. The aliens had tried to eliminate humanity by destroying their worlds, but instead they had created 17 living libraries of their most dangerous secrets. The massive construction bay doors opened with a deep rumbling sound that vibrated through the floor beneath Day One's feet. Beyond those doors lay humanity's greatest achievement, and their most defiant answer to those who had tried to destroy them. Commander Park had cleared him through security an hour ago. Now he stood at the threshold of the most classified project in human space, looking at something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The Lazarus engine stretched before him like a mechanical cathedral built by gods who understood both destruction and creation. It was enormous, easily the size of a city block, with towers and arrays that reached up toward the bay's ceiling. Blue energy coursed through transparent tubes that ran along its surface like glowing veins. Day One walked slowly across the bay floor, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Other workers moved around the machine, making final adjustments and running last-minute system checks. But they all moved quietly, as if they understood they were in the presence of something sacred. This was not a weapon. The hegemony built planet killers, massive devices designed to sterilize worlds and turn living planets into dead rocks floating in space. Humanity had built something far more threatening to everything the hegemony believed about the universe. They had built a planet maker. Day One approached the main control interface, a complex array of screens and controls that he had spent 5 years designing. Every switch and display had been planned by someone who understood exactly how much energy it took to destroy a world, because he carried the proof of that destruction burned into his chest. He ran his scarred fingers over the smooth surface of the control panel. The burn patterns across his chest had been his teacher for 15 years. They had shown him the exact energy signatures used by hegemony planet killer weapons. They had taught him about frequency resonance, energy absorption, and the precise amount of power needed to crack a planet's crust or boil away its oceans. Most people would have used that knowledge to build bigger weapons. Day One had used it to build the opposite. The Lazarus engine was a terraforming device capable of bringing dead worlds back to life in a matter of days instead of centuries. Where the hegemony channeled energy to destroy, the Lazarus engine channeled the same forces to create. It could restart a planet's core, rebuild its atmosphere, and seed its surface with life-supporting organisms. "System ready for deployment," announced So Young from the engineering station across the bay. She was another planet killer survivor, her arms covered with distinctive scars from the bombardment that had destroyed her world 20 years ago. Those scars had led her to breakthrough discoveries in atmospheric engineering that made the Lazarus engine possible. Through the massive viewport that dominated one wall of the construction bay, Day One could see their target. The planet hung in space like a gray marble, lifeless and cold. The hegemony had sterilized it 40 years ago when a peaceful trading species had refused to surrender their world to the Empire. Nothing had lived on that planet's surface for 4 decades. Its oceans were radioactive. Its atmosphere was poisonous. Its soil was nothing but irradiated dust. The hegemony had made it a monument to their power, a warning to other species about what happened to those who defied them. In 72 hours, that dead world would be green again. Other survivors worked throughout the bay, each one contributing knowledge learned from their own scars. Minute-Ho operated the atmospheric processes that would rebuild the planet's air. His burns had taught him about gas composition under extreme pressure. Unji managed the biological seeding systems that would plant the first life on the restored world. Her scars had shown her how organic matter behaved under intense radiation. All 17 Planet Killer survivors had contributed to the Lazarus engine in some way. Each set of scars had revealed different secrets about energy manipulation, planetary systems, or biological processes. The hegemony had tried to kill them, but instead had given them the knowledge needed to undo everything the Empire had accomplished. Day 1 touched a series of controls and the Lazarus engine began its startup sequence. Deep within the machine, power cores that had been designed using energy patterns stolen from Planet Killer weapons began to generate the massive amounts of energy needed for planetary restoration. The irony was not lost on him. The same technology that had burned the scars into his chest was now powering a machine that would heal worlds. The hegemony had spent centuries perfecting the art of destruction, never imagining that their victims would learn to run those processes in reverse. Through the viewport, energy beams began reaching out from the Lazarus engine toward the dead planet. But these beams carried life instead of death. They penetrated the planet's crust not to crack it apart, but to restart its geological processes. They touched the poisoned atmosphere not to burn it away, but to transform it into breathable air. As the Lazarus engine powered up to full operation, its energy signatures painted new patterns of light across the construction bay. The light reflected off the scars visible on the arms and faces of the survivors working throughout the facility. For a moment, their old wounds seemed to glow with the same energy that was bringing life back to a dead world. The hegemony had tried to teach humanity about death. Instead, they had taught 17 humans to become architects of resurrection. Every world they had destroyed would eventually be restored. Every species they had eliminated would find new homes on planets brought back from the dead. Day 1 smiled as he watched the dead planet beginning its transformation. The universe's cruelest teachers had created students who would spend their lives undoing every lesson in destruction the galaxy had ever learned.